All right. Again, thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much, Saurabh, for making an appearance. And it will be helpful, your experience as well. So,
Thank you, Sanjeev.
yeah. So, I think let's take a bit of feedback and see how people are feeling, what sort of feedback they have. If people can come on camera and let's have some interaction. Let's see how you have performed and how what is your feedback. Also, you would have seen recording after that. You would have tried to set up cluster. I can see that there is an AWS group created and there is an Azure group created. So that's a good start because even though Kubernetes, it's supposed to be a platform independent, but that's when you start rolling out applications. As an admin, when we start setting up the cluster, it's important where the cluster is. So it follows their storage, their admin capabilities, the roles required, and all that. So, how's your feeling? How are you feeling? You would have seen the presentation also thereafter. Anyone, any feedback? Like, what did you guys do thereafter apart from setting up? Or should I don't know. We can go ahead with some sort of coding, or let's go. Do we go through naming him? So Sumit, maybe Sumit Manchanta is on the call. Maybe you can explain what a namespace is. People who are online.
Hello. Hello.
Sumit, can you hear us? No. Akash, your camera seems to be on, but it's dark. So anything from your side?
Hi. Sorry, actually, I'm currently working on my office shift, and there's a P1 call going on. I
Okay,
don't think I would be able to actively participate over here.
no worries. There is so much noise in the background.
Yeah, I think those people who are not speaking, maybe
Yeah,
just they can mute off.
yeah, people who are not talking, please stay on
Hello.
mute. Hi.
Am I audible? Hello, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir. My name is Sagar Lokande. Recently, I have worked on. I have actually studied on Kubernetes also. But in our task, what I did actually, I have created a one. I have created a EKS cluster using before that I have created a console using console. Okay, EKS cluster using console, so
Okay.
that I got the so that I got the idea what I wanted to do. So then I have created a EKS cluster using Terraform scripts. So just I understand that what should I attach the policy. EKS cluster. Firstly, we should attach EKS cluster policy, and we should then attach another policy to worker node also, so that I did that, but I just used a default VPC. I didn't create a custom VPC. Firstly, I just wanted to hands-on on that. So
Yep.
then in next task, I will do that also.
That's absolutely.
But I got some confidence. So Terraform, before that I didn't hands-on on Terraform, but now actually I just little bit I got the confidence also. So
Yeah.
టైటిల్ కంట్రోల్ చేసుకుంటాలే ఇప్పుడు ఇబ్బంది మళ్ళీ అడ్రస్ పేరు తగ్గించినప్పుడు దాన్ని
People who
Hello.
are not talking, please go on mute. It's very distracting.
Hey Sanjeev, Rohit is here.
Yeah, hi Rohit.
Yeah. First of all, I will thank you for organizing such an amazing cloud batch because it's proving very helpful for me. Before this, I haven't used Terraform yet. I have learned configuration management tool like Ansible, but I haven't used Terraform. And before this, I used to manage our AWS services. Like if I have to use RDS or anything, then I have to use. I was using it manually, but I just spent some time in learning, reading some documentation from Terraform official website and learning things and just apply things. So best thing I came across that this is the beauty of Terraform. I came across like we can create and just destroy all our resources by a single Terraform destroy command, because I also came across the cost issue while tackle the things manually, and I think that was the best things for me just by learning Terraform. And I also have a look on directory, that how it's used to avoid misconfiguration before deploy the things inside the production environment. And I also have a look on Kubernetes dashboard. I also try to implement those things also. And I have created cluster manually Azure by creating default like control plane in default VPC and worker node in custom VPC while creating subnets and public subnet and private subnet and attaching internet gateway as well. So
Oh,
that's amazing experience for me, and I think I am going to learn more thing in upcoming.
that's a massive achievement. I have seen most of the people trying in the default VPC. If you go for a custom VPC and custom subnets, it gives you a lot of power, because eventually that is the idea, that the worker nodes are not going to be in the public subnet, they are going to be in the private subnet. But as a starting point, first week I suggested, go for which makes you comfortable, which makes you ready or for the future tasks. So that was the idea, which is good. So talking is important. We need to talk about it, because eventually 90% of us are trying to learn to justify in any interview, to justify our experience. So talking will give you that sort of, doing is one side, and then talking about it, what we have done, that will also go next level and will make you ready that you have worked on a project yourself. So that is the
Yes.
whole idea. So keep doing these sort of things. Terraform is absolutely must. What we forget in Terraform is that you can not only provision your cluster using the Terraform provider for AWS and Azure and GCP. You can actually manage your Kubernetes cluster deployments using Terraform. So there are specific providers for a Kubernetes cluster as well. So while like you are creating namespace, you will be creating service and other deployments, you can use Terraform to manage that as well. So that sort of project would be the next level, and that's what I have seen a lot of companies also adopting, using Terraform to not just manage the cloud resources, but also your Kubernetes deployments as well. But we'll not get there yet. All right, anyone wants to add? Did anyone research and did some analysis of what sort of resources that can be deployed on Kubernetes? We discussed a bunch of them, but there was this task to understand the terms in more detail. Anyone who can explain me 2 or 3 terms like namespace, persistent volume claim, that would be helpful. A service.
Sure, Sanjeev, I can try.
Yeah.
So persistent volume claim, what I have read is basically suppose we have deployed something, deployed our resources on inside the Kubernetes cluster, inside the pods. And because of some issues, because of some tolerance or some fault or some issues, if the cluster got damage, that's not a good word damage, but if there is some sort of issue, then we have a persistence volume. inside the pod that can be used by every containers inside those pods as a data backup, you can say.
Okay.
So that's, I think, what I learned about the persistent.
Or we can say
All right. Yeah.
can I speak?
Okay.
Yeah, we can say like container are fragile and container destroying and recreating. So when the container destroyed, then the data or logs or the application related files we need, like when the container recreate, so that we need the application state from that, like when the container stopped or destroyed. So persistent volume help in that way also.
Yep. So any sort of
Sanjeev, from my understanding, is that PVC we used it for to connect to a pod directly. We can't connect any other storage to a pod, right? We only have to create it through PVC. So firstly, we create PV from any other resources like EBS or any other storage class. Then we create PVC from that PV, and then we attach that PVC to the pod, right? I don't think it's I don't think it's for backup, but if I'm wrong, can you correct me?
It is for backup, but I would want to understand some more details. Research part. What is the main difference between PV and PVC? And that there was a note in the presentation that I left.
Yeah, Sanjay, adding to the earlier points. So PVC claim is, I'm claiming that I want a particular amount of storage from the PV. So I want 5 GB from this PV. So that is what the claim I am giving. Correct. So for this part to work, I want a 50 GB or 10 GB like that.
Yes, that is you are claiming 5 GB from the storage. But what is the main difference between PVC and PV? Still, that question is somewhere. Shubham answered it slightly, but didn't answer the exact thing.
Yes, Sanjeev, this is Abdul here.
Yeah.
What I noticed is both PV and storage class are global. Yes. And PVC is a namespace. It belongs to a particular namespace. Yeah.
Correct. So this is the main difference. That's why we discussed PV and PVC in the previous session mainly.
Hi, Sanjeev. Hello.
Yeah, hi.
I can continue. The main difference between PV and PVC is that in PVC we can request for a storage by the pods. That is also main difference. And in PV, just we can represent a piece of storage in clusters.
Exactly. So because it is requested by a pod, it is namespaced and will be part of a specific namespace. But because PV and storage are global, multiple pods, multiple namespaces can use it. That leads to next question. What is namespace? Very basic question. Some of the interviews I have seen them asking this question. What is the namespace? Why do we need it? What value it adds?
Sir, I can explain that. Actually, it's a basic namespace. We can say it's a basic directory structure. It's not the correct words directory structure, but it's like provides a mechanism for isolating groups of in a single cluster. So that, and every time if suppose we just create a namespace like demo, so in that demo we should all the deployments comes in that namespace.
Yes, that is the way, you can say it is the way the Kubernetes resources are going to be organized. So it can be used to deploy multiple applications in different namespaces so that they don't impact each other, the resources. But the other advantage is that you can assign different roles and responsibilities. So if you want to give me permissions to a dev namespace, you can do that. And that way you can isolate all other namespaces from me. So you can define your role-based access, etc. at namespace level. So it's a directory structure. It's the way you organize, but also you can provide access based on namespaces.
Moreover, we can communicate also. We can
Yes,
communicate different teams, and by this names is very important for.
correct.
Mm.
So this is how you try to explain different stuff. What about the service?
In simple terms, it's a static IP, and it will act as a load balancer for your backend pods.
Correct. So
it's not a process.
Like
We don't restart or we don't restart
yes,
service.
because the pods and the containers are very temporary in nature and can be highly unstable. You need something holding a static IP so that you can connect to your external endpoints or internal services. That's why we discuss that we don't research and find out how different Docker containers are going to talk to each other. A lot of those things are isolated, managed by Kubernetes and kubeproxy itself. What we need to understand is that eventually different services are going to talk to each other. Our user interface is, if it is talking to database, will talk at a service level, not at a pod or a specific temporary endpoint. It will be a stable service endpoint that it will communicate with. And then within that service, you can define replica sets, and it will ensure that the required number of pods are always there. All right, so I think you guys have done a bit of homework. So with that, even if some people have not studied, try to set up the cluster. That was the main task. Try to integrate with tree and have dashboard ready, and then get rid of the tree, because this will prevent you from doing a lot of development work that you are doing. So their policies are so tight, and you will struggle pushing your stuff to the cluster. So get rid of that. That was just for you to add one option in your project, that we integrated with a tool that can prevent misconfiguration before they are pushed to the cluster. It's not like after it's analyzing something. Before you push your changes, this can give you feedback right away.
Hi Sanjeev, this is my first class actually.
Yeah.
It's really dear. So like I've gone through the video, like so I was having a little query about it. So like if I create the cluster, three clusters in the EKS cluster. So if I want to switch the clusters from one context to another context, so we have already deployed the application in one cluster. So if I want to switch the clusters, how I need to do it?
So for this project, for now, for short term, we don't need 3 different clusters to be set up.
Okay.
So there you will. It's just like you can set the context in your kubectl, but we will not rely on kubectl to do our day-to-day operations. We will rely on the ArgoCD, and that's what we will take a look at the this week's tasks, how we do that. We can, to save cost and to keep it simplified, we can use one single cluster, and using those namespaces, we will differentiate whether this is a dev stage or production environment.
Okay.
Different environments.
Okay.
Sanjeev, I have a small doubt. PV and PVC is different for Azure Cloud and AWS Cloud. I mean, it differs from cloud to cloud, the way of action it performs.
So we explained this. There is difference and there is similarity. So for example, every person will have a name or something, but name is common, but that name value can be different. So similarly, in PV and PVC is a Kubernetes term, which doesn't depend on Azure or AWS or GCP. However, because it's a storage and Azure has different storage class and it's named differently, so they will use the Azure specific storage. AWS will use its own and GCP will use its own. So that way they are different. I hope that helps. If you look at the presentation we shared last week, there you will have PV, PVC, and then on the right you have storage class. When you define storage class, you will specify whether it is an Azure storage that you are creating or AWS storage that you are creating. So that way it will be defined. And when we go into the second week, third week, when we actually do the project, depending upon which cloud platform you are using, you will have to do that activity, so that it will be even more clear when you do it.
So just on a stock take of how many people were successfully able to create cluster and node groups, can you just all raise your hands using Zoom? In Zoom, there's a reaction. You can use that. Okay. So we have a few. So but there are quite a few number of people who could not create the clusters. So with respect to, so I think I'm just giving count, there are around 15-20 people who were successfully able to create the clusters.
There are more actually. I think there are more, Saurabh. Just that on the screen they are.
Oh, okay. On the screen, I can see
So,
only.
if you look at the entire chat,
Yep.
most of them are able to create the cluster. And if somebody is struggling, we have other groups. You take help during the week if you are struggling setting up the cluster, or most of the people have got it. People have done it through the user interface, through Terraform, etc.
Yeah.
Yes, Sanjeev, I have one question. So as part of this project, we are going through ArgoCD. Is that correct?
Yeah.
For Jenkins pipeline, we are not going for.
We will do Jenkins pipeline. I explained last week. We'll do it today as well. Last week it was like slightly longer session, so we will discuss why we are not using Jenkins and where we will still use Jenkins in this project also.
I heard that due to secrets, we are not going to.
It's secrets. Let me share this screen to answer that. Let me share screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Sanjeev.
The presentation, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we will be following this structure. Let me go full screen. So we will be following this structure on the right. Again, slightly high level, but we will go detailed into this today. And we will use the application, which is a pet clinic application. We use this application in the last month batch also, but this time we will deploy in the cluster. So we will still use Jenkins, or for that matter, Azure DevOps, or any such tool that you are comfortable with, GitLab, GitHub Actions, because that is just going to be creating the Docker images that we want eventually to be used in our cluster on the right-hand side. So there will be a CI component which will be using any of the tool that we want. Why we don't use Jenkins to deploy is that this is the that architecture where if we have to use Jenkins, then how we will use is we will have our deployment configurations that we want the cluster to look like. We will push that into GitHub. Jenkins will have kubectl installed just like you have right now on your terminal, your laptop. It will push the Docker images, and then using kubectl, it will try to manage the cluster. But we need to understand that there are many issues with kubectl when kubectl is going to manage. The issues are that you are adding extra tool in the pipeline which has the credentials of your Kubernetes cluster. So it adds a lot of security issue, because Jenkins is used for all your development reasons and it has a lot of plugins available. You don't want to increase the surface area of your application. One important thing to understand here is that most of the time Kubernetes cluster is going to work on or going to be used for applications that are elastic in nature, that are scaling up and down very frequently, which indirectly means that it is likely to be very critical applications in the business, which are customer facing applications. For any application which is used internally by a company, usually they know that I have 100 employees. I have, even if I know it has 10,000 employees, I know there is a limit and I can plan accordingly. I can put that kind of application onto some VMs and manage it. I don't get into complexity of things. But with Kubernetes, usually they are critical applications, and most of the time they're customer facing applications. So security is has to be much more higher. So you putting a kube config file onto a Jenkins machine, and with the rights that it can deploy, it basically means the Jenkins has all the credentials, everything that you can destroy your cluster using that. And that is a big risk. That's one thing. Then once you do a kubectl deploy command, you don't have much control what happened to that. If something was not right with that command, something you triggered, but because the resources were not there on the worker node and your process could not be started, Jenkins would not know much about it. Jenkins, it's more like a fire and forget kind of scenario. You fire a command, you don't know what happened, you just expect that it would work, which can be right or wrong. So in that scenario is also not appropriate. ArgoCD solves both these options. And the third most important is rollback also. With Jenkins kubectl, for example, you have to set up a cluster and you do kubectl say 100 times and you deploy entire your application into the cluster, and that's happy days. But what happens if your entire cluster goes down, your entire region of your AWS or Azure goes down? There might be a need for you to very quickly create another cluster from your specifications. Now kubectl, because it has sequence of commands, if they are not properly documented, if different teams are managing, these are all isolated teams, they have their own documentation, bringing a cluster to life can be very long period, and that means the entire downtime and all that for critical applications. ArgoCD solves all these problems. You can spin up a new cluster and deploy your applications just pointing to a new ArgoCD setup. ArgoCD ensures that your application is in sync with the source code. So it will poll the source code and based on this scenario. So it will ensure that that ArgoCD will poll, and based on whatever configurations you have specified, it will create. If for any reason your cluster goes down, is crashed or anything, as soon as you start a new cluster, ArgoCD will pull that and start everything that was available initially. So rollbacks are easier because ArgoCD is inside the cluster. You are not sharing your secrets anywhere. So that removes the security issue. So there are a lot of benefits. That's why ArgoCD, or for that matter, there are other tools as well. Flux is there, and then some other tools which helps in the GitOps approach. It is the GitOps way of managing infrastructure. Tools are still not so relevant. So we won't say the ArgoCD is the default tool for Kubernetes. GitOps is the, you can say, sort of default way how applications should be deployed. It can be through ArgoCD or some other tool as well.
Hey, Sanjeev.
Yeah.
Which monitoring tool we are going to use? Are we going to use Prometheus or Grafana?
That's we'll discuss it next week. It's not, we will first get this and the next week's output. We'll discuss the monitoring tools.
Sanjeev, I have one question.
Yep.
Suppose if we make any manual changes on the clusters, the Kubernetes clusters, so ArgoCD will ensure that those manual changes are overwritten.
Absolutely, that's the beauty, right? If any admin, any developer or someone patches the Kubernetes cluster manually, which is not desired, ArgoCD will deny that, will bring, for example, you created extra pods, which are not required, which are not, you did not follow the process. You just manually did it. ArgoCD will ensure that they are not desired things and it will roll it back. Everything should be infra as code. So that improves the, you can create pull request, you can get it reviewed, and these secretly done things are avoided. That's again beauty of ArgoCD.
Hi Sanjeev, this is Pawan. I have one small request question.
Yeah.
Actually, is there regarding the last week task, is there anywhere we can find, what is the best practice? Because we all might have done in our own way, right? Like, so if you can share the best practice or a best way to create the VPCs, create the cluster and the node group. I mean, in terms of Terraform code, so we can compare and improve.
So there are a lot of best practices. It's not just limited to, just specific, but the problem is that it is probably not the right time for implementing all of them together. So we should discuss them, that how we can add additional layer of security, additional things that are done in the organizations that we can do towards the end of this. And you can maybe take it as next step, try to implement all those practices as well. The challenge with that would be a lot of things will stop working the moment you start doing that, because your instances will go into private subnets. If you have, for example, planning to pull your containers from a container repository of your own self-managed container repository, Docker repository, which is say ECR or Azure Kubernetes, Azure Docker repository, those sort of connections will stop working. So you need to have endpoints enabled for that. The worker nodes should be created from an AMI that you are managing. So if you have to install additional tools and additional patching of those AMIs have to be done, you manage that. So there are a lot of things that can be done, and we will probably look at them towards the end of the project.
Okay, thank you.
Some of the things that are very obvious and very relevant right away, because this can get very complex very quickly. I have tried to simplify things to a certain extent, but at the same time, focus is on following those best practices, but not so much that we enforce them from day one. For example, tree integration that we did, that would prevent you from doing a lot of things. That's a good practice that in production, yes, use that. Why not prevent misconfigurations upfront? But if you implement this, you won't be able to do any development stuff on your cluster. So that's why I'm suggesting get rid of this right away. Just watch it, understand it, and because it's in a separate namespace gets created, just get rid of that namespace and the deployment. But I have listed some of the basic stuff that we will follow. We'll be using secrets. Now the secret management, preferably we should be using the cloud provided secret management. But for now, let's proceed with the AWS, with the Kubernetes managed secrets, and then we will eventually look at how we can take it to next level. Right? Okay, so directly or indirectly, we jumped into what we need to do in the next 2 weeks. So next 2 weeks, we plan to deploy the application into the cluster using the ArgoCD approach. And you can ignore this first repository, or you can, if you want to, you already have a cluster with a worker node, you can deploy this application if you want to. But that's not our eventual target, because this is slightly complex. Multiple nodes, multiple pods are there, multiple services are there in this. And also it doesn't persist any data. Mostly it's user interface and has some static data in one of the pods. So this does not actually helps us to create those volume claims and that we want to implement in our project. Pet Clinic solves that. It has a user interface as well as the database, which we want to persist. And but we will go to how we prove that it's persisting. We will eventually, what we will do is we will finish this CI/CD using ArgoCD eventually, and then we will terminate one of our worker node and recreate the worker node again. So when the application starts again, we should have our data available to the whatever database entries that we had made, that should be persisted. So that is the eventual project that we want to go into. Not just deploy the application and see the user interface and that's all. See the interface, destroy all the containers that we have, destroy the entire worker node we have, and recreate a new worker node using ArgoCD. That worker node should be configured the way previous worker node was, instantly without us doing anything. It should have all the data that we had created earlier. That is the eventual goal. And this Pet Clinic application is very suitable for that kind of implementing and testing that kind of scenario. That is self-healing, auto-scaling, the benefits of ArgoCD, all that will be very visible to you guys. And you can easily then justify in your discussions. All right.
Hello. One question.
Because your cameras are not on, I don't know who asked the question first. So go for anyone.
Yeah, Sanjeev. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sanjeev, you were running one repository for Pet Clinic app, right?
Yeah.
So, so is there a way we can get an idea about the cost? If we running the application for 1 hour, 2 hours, what will be the instances the application will launch?
So you will not need, or I can give you a rough idea. You probably need one single worker node of the size T3 medium is what I would suggest, which is in AWS. You can find out the equivalent in other platforms.
Okay.
The cost is not with this application. The cost is with that instance that is going to be your worker node.
Okay.
So you can expect in the range of $1 per 12 hours or say 12 hours. Yeah, one day of full time usage, assuming you will be not using for the rest 12 hours. So it is going to be in that range. So if you do it, say 3-4 hours per day and terminate your node, it's probably going to be less than $50. And you do it for 5-6 days, the entire POC, entire project, you can do in $2-3.
Okay. Like if we are running application in EKS, okay. So as I go through the documentation on AWS side, so there is separate cost for EKS, and what about the running resources under the EKS cluster, like the EC2 instances, database?
Yep, all those things. Let's take a look at.
There is separate.
You can see the screen.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. So this is the on the top we have the EKS control plane. There is separate cost for AWS to manage control plane for us, which is they have standardized, which is $0.1 per hour and that is like, and then the number of worker nodes that you create, the number of load balancers that you will create for your application, any RDS you will create is going to be an extra cost. But because we are not going to use RDS and we're not going to use any additional major resources, obviously we will have to use some storage and a load balancer. So yes, that is also going to cost extra. So that's why we use Terraform to create them. So if you are working for say 2 hours, 1 hour per day, you create the cluster before you start working on it, and you destroy the cluster immediately after that. So the cost is going to be much lower side, but you have to manage that.
Okay, great, thank you.
And if someone like has really constraints, they don't want to spend or they don't have credit card, students, and they can always use Minikube for that. Use Minikube, use Docker Desktop on your computer, use WSL Linux on your laptop, and you can very well build this project there.
Sandeep, when will we will stop the cluster? What would happen? I mean, if we don't terminate it and we stop the worker node, T2.medium I have taken, what would happen in this case?
So I think you will not be charged for the VM usage, but the storage that you have created to for that instance, that you will still some cost will be associated with that.
Okay.
So it's nothing but just an EC2. So just see what is the cost of a running EC2 and what is the cost of a stopped EC2. You are not charged for the compute, but you are still charged for the storage that it has created.
Okay. But T2.medium would work, right?
T2 medium may not work. So let me, so most of the time, the issues with cluster are because of two things. Majorly, I won't say these are the only things that your Kubernetes cluster can be unhealthy. One, when the worker nodes are not enough, the worker nodes are CPU constrained, and you don't have you don't have auto scaling. You have said you have desired is I need just one T2 medium and that's it. Then because EKS cluster will also deploy its own resources, the kubelet, kube proxy, and there is another component. So that is also going to take some resources in from your T2 micro or that one. So if you try to deploy something that's not working, that is one of the reason that your cluster can be unhealthy. Your pod creation is going to fail, and then you will be surprised that some of the documentation that you see online to install tree component or to install Argo, because Argo is also going to be inside your cluster. So you may struggle. I was struggling with a lot of, I was trying if T2 medium can, but I decided that I will go with T3 medium at least. And the second thing, when it is unstable, one is that you don't have given enough resources. There are other reasons. It could be majorly it's the version mismatch, that the commands or the information that you are finding online is not relevant to the Kubernetes version that you are managing. But otherwise, if your Docker file is working on your laptop, Docker file is from a stable resource, stable, trusted provider, then putting that onto your cluster, following a lot of online documentation will give you right results. But if you don't have the version mismatch, if you don't have the enough resources in your cluster, you will see that it's very unstable.
Hello, Sanjeev, one more question. Sorry, you can complete.
So if we have a cluster here with say T2 medium or T2 micro, can we vertically scale it in the cloud?
So it's not advised. The advice is usually to scale horizontal in the cloud. So you have auto scaling group, which will ask you want T2 T3 or whichever type of EC2 instance you want, and then horizontal scale, like add instead of add 1, 2, 3, 4, you keep increasing the number of worker nodes. If you increase vertically, T2 to T3, one, you won't find that option easily. Second, the cost will escalate very quickly.
Okay.
So there are two options in this, like add additional worker nodes, that is horizontal cluster scaling. And then within this one worker node, you add additional pods for your containers. That's horizontal autoscaler of your pod scaler, rather. Horizontal pod scaler. So we will set up HPAs in our environment as well. But we will not do worker nodes autoscaling.
One more thing, Sanjeev. Can you please help in where we can check like how many worker node will be created and what will be the size?
In the cloud platform, you manage that. In the cloud platform, it's your configuration that you will define how many worker nodes you want and how you want to increment.
If we take the example of our application, pet application, so can you help to navigate where we can check that?
I didn't get the question.
I'm asking, like we have a Terraform file, okay? So when we use Terraform apply, so what will be the resource and what will be the worker node that will be created by the Terraform file? Can you please help me?
You will. That's what I'm saying. You will define that in your Terraform code.
In our application, we have one application, sample application. Can you help to navigate in that application configuration?
Let me explain you. Where are you creating your cluster? Is it AWS?
AWS, right?
Okay. So when you are creating, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see.
AWS console.
Yeah.
So this is one cluster that we have configured in our account.
Okay.
And you will see that we define our compute. We create a managed node group, and within that we create a T3 VM. Someone is still not muted. Can you please go on mute?
Sanjeev, do you have the power to mute people?
Mute all, let me do it. Okay, there was a button. Yes, thank you, Saurabh. Okay, but still you can unmute and then come back again. It will mute everyone for now. So yeah, this is the node. But when we create, for example, let me get rid of this node if we want to. But that will stop my entire setup. What happens is that let's add another node. So we are adding another node group for this. We are going to specify a launch template. A launch template, if you have worked on AWS, then you can specify in this what your instance size is going to be, what AMI it's going to use, and that kind of thing. So I will not use this for now. And then you can specify the instance type within this. Same thing you are going to do in your Terraform code, where you will specify which AMI to use as part of your auto-scaling configuration, which AMI, which type of instance.
Do we have this configuration in our current Terraform files for this pet application?
No.
Or we are just, no?
The pet application repository, if you have seen, it's the application that we are going to deploy. It's not the infrastructure.
Okay.
So it's a Spring Boot application. Take a look about this application also. So this is not infrastructure app. This is more of a Spring Boot application, which is using Maven or Gradle to build. And it does not have a Docker file. Again, you will have to create that Docker file to generate. A lot of people are there in the group who have already done this, because this was used in the July project as well. They can help you. This is how the interface shows up if you run it on localhost, and you can also provide it, provide external database configuration, MySQL database. So we will use the same setup again. In our previous batch, we did set up RDS for this. In this one, we're making a change. We will use the microservices based database, which will use persistent volume claim, and have the storage class underneath to store the information. That's how the database will be. So there will not be any RDS. But
here we are not creating the infra.
In this,
Terraform,
yes.
right?
Yeah, you create your own repository. You can create Terraform, but Terraform will be creating the cluster and the worker nodes associated. This is, you will build package, you will create a container image, and then pull the container image onto worker node and deploy.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello, Sanjeev.
Yep. Hi.
Are we not going to build Docker file from scratch in this project for this pet clinic application?
We are going to, because the application that we have given, you assume that your company has given this application to you, which you have to containerize. You have to push the image to a container registry. So we are going to use. But the only advantage is people have done it, and that is not the core thing that we want to analyze in this. We still do it, but that's not the main motive behind it. You can very easily do that kind of thing online. You can find content around internet and how to build pet clinic and that sort of thing. It's not the core of the project.
Hi, sir.
Hello. Just hold on to any question. If it is what we will do, how we will do. If it is anything else, then bring it.
Yes, sir. I have cluster, EKS cluster. Sorry, I have Kubernetes cluster by using Vagrant on VirtualWorks. Can I use this cluster instead of EKS for all the deployment?
Yes, you should be able to use it. Just that any debugging, any issue you get into doing that, try to find somebody within the group who is doing same sort of thing, so that you guys can share and debug for each other. But otherwise, very well, you can do it.
It means it's possible.
It is possible, yes.
Yes, thank you. Because using EKS, it's a very much billing. That's
why I said you can use your own cluster configured Minikube, or if you have set up a VirtualBox environment, you can use that.
Thank you, sir.
Sanjeev, this is Siva. Is it possible to share screen?
Am I not sharing my screen?
No. I want to share screen and show. Is it possible?
I would suggest not do that unless it's very critical thing. Do it in the Zoom time. What is the issue you are facing?
No, not the issue. See, I'm seeing a lot of queries on AWS. So I got a last month bill, which is for 6 hours EKS cluster with some time running T3 medium. I thought of showing that one so that everyone will get some idea.
Go for it. Take just one minute and show it very quickly.
Yeah, but I am getting post this. Yeah, participant screen sharing is not possible like that.
1 second.
Siva Kumar.
Oh, I have given it to everyone for now. You should have sharing permissions. But don't be discouraged. It's not going to be massive, but keep an eye on this. Keep deleting your resources. You should be fine.
Yeah.
That's why I earlier mentioned.
Okay, yeah. So this is for 6 hours. So it is per hour, it is $0.10. So I got 0.61. And T3 medium, I changed from micro to medium. So it is for half an hour. So it is $0.02. Whereas if you run for an hour, it is $0.04.
Yep.
So for this thing, I got $1, including tax. So this is what everyone should get an idea.
Right.
See, just for this, see, only thing we want to do is we should be mindful that we will terminate the instances. That's it.
Right.
Terraform, see, better go with Terraform approach so that we'll get some hands-on approach also. And Terraform destroy, if you give, you are guaranteed that all the resources are getting deleted. And one more thing, what I will do, daily I will look for the billing dashboard so that I will not get any surprises. Daily I have a habit of checking the billing dashboard.
Correct.
I thought this might be helpful. That's why.
Thank you. Thanks, Shiva. Yeah, this is great. Like, keep an eye on this. Set up some alerts for every $10 or something that you are spending. But I would still suggest, if you can, try to do it in any cloud provider environment, EKS, AKS still, because that is what industry is using. So you are more close to any of the cloud platform. So if the money is not such a concern, it may get into 10, 15, 20, maybe $50 for the entire project, but it's still worth it, because the amount of knowledge you are getting on a cloud platform is much more different. If you set up a Docker desktop, a lot of the storage class and all this will automatically be given to your cluster. So a lot of things are behind the scene automated in Docker desktop on Windows. It will take a portion of your machine storage from your, say, main drive, and will make it available to the cluster. So it's that straightforward and not very complicated. You don't get into the real issues related to public subnets and private subnets and that kind of connectivity thing. So you get the real feel when you are doing it in the cloud, but it's not for everyone, but we can always, but if you can afford, try to do it in the cloud. Okay. So what do we do this week? Let's write down. I have written down some of the questions. So some of the prompts that we should do this week. So read through this week 2 related tasks and the slides in slightly more detail. We are estimating that we will take 2 weeks on this. First week, we will try to configure ArgoCD within our environment, within the Kubernetes cluster that we have configured. And that too, with a bit of setting up ArgoCD is not that difficult. You just, if your cluster has resources, I have already given some commands to you. You can create a namespace with the name of ArgoCD, and these are all coming from the Argo documentation. You can kubectl apply the ArgoCD manifest file and wait for all the pods to be available. And once that happens, roughly 5 minutes, then you can start that service, expose your service on localhost. The default admin username and password, there are specific instructions to get the default passwords that is set for your cluster. So you take that password will show up something like this. And because we discussed last week that the passwords are base 64 encoded, we will decode that base 64, and that's how we get the actual password. And this is mainly following these documentation. I've tried to simplify that. You can follow the ArgoCD documentation as well. This is how I have, if you see in my cluster, what I did was I exposed this on port 80 and after port 8080, and after that I started getting this ArgoCD user interface. Again, we will use your user interface for some of our practice, but it will not be, eventually it will not be used. We will be managing through infrastructure as code through repositories. So if I go here, you will see there is a test repository, test deployment already that ArgoCD is managing. And if you look at its details, what basically I did was I can create new app from here. I can give the application name, some name. I can give my project name, or I can select the namespace for that. I can do a manual sync policy or automatic sync policy. We will eventually use automatic sync policy. And we will say which Git repository we want to use. So I used one of the app that we have in the presentation, so we'll not worry about this URL. This is basically where our config files are, and I took one from this example. This has everything. This has a Docker file. There is, but we have to use retail store sample app for reference purpose, not for our project purpose. So just for referencing, I'm trying to deploy because I don't want to build a new Docker file, don't want to build push the image and then download. So I just want to view the, so I will specify which repository I'm going to use. It supports different kind of source code, but we will continue to use Git for now. Provide the Git repository URL, and then you can specify for which branches you want to use. So you want to use your main branch or any specific branch. Okay. And that's it. You specify the your cluster, your Kubernetes cluster that you are managing right now, where the ArgoCD is installed. And that's pretty much, you just say add. That's it, create. That's how I got this test application created. But how you will do it is by writing specific manifest file for this. Eventually, what I provided through user interface is very much like creating the resources through AWS console. You will say that this is the repository it has to use, and this is our destination Kubernetes cluster address, and that's how it will be deployed. So you try to take it to next stage where you will have this written in a configuration file, and then using ArgoCD, you will update your ArgoCD setup within your cluster. So you will probably have to, for some of you will have to watch this again, this video 2-3 times maybe. This is how we deploy ArgoCD inside the cluster. But the ArgoCD is set up as a default configuration. It is not monitoring any of the Git repository that the project has. So this is installing Argo inside the cluster with default settings. The setting that what we need to achieve is ArgoCD should also monitor our Git repository where our configurations are. So that is the second stage where we will create a manifest file and use ArgoCD to ensure that there is a connectivity between them. So again, that sort of information we need to achieve, and we don't have to go anywhere else. Most of the commands I have already provided, but you have to follow this specific page where you will be able to. I have all the commands except this one. This command. So this is creating an example guestbook application with following command. So it's basically telling ArgoCD, create an app called guestbook and take this repository. This is the path and the destination server within the namespace default. That's pretty much we are telling ArgoCD to start monitoring this specific Git repository. And then whatever we write in this Git repository will be tracked by the ArgoCD, and everything will be maintained in sync. That's how we will achieve this kind of setup. Then any DevOps engineer, he has to deploy pet clinic. He will specify pet clinic specifications here. You have to deploy online retail app. You will specify that online retail app, these many pods, this service, everything you specify here, that ArgoCD will automatically start doing that. So first week, we need to configure ArgoCD inside the cluster. Make sure that your GitOps repo, whatever you provide, give it a very basic Nginx kind of image to download, so that you can avoid overhead of creating all this Docker image, and that should not be a blocker for you. That you spend a lot of time building the Docker image and you could not work on this. This is the main part of our project rather than building the image. Eventually, we will build the image also. Second difference, what we will do is because we don't have multiple clusters, there was a question that in the industry, yes, you will probably have a different dev cluster and a different staging cluster and a production cluster and any number of environments you have. But for our simpler environment, we will have our application configuration in Git repository, but using different branches, we will create different namespaces. So in the command that we give, same repository, but for a dev branch, we will use a dev namespace. But for a main branch, we will use a namespace called prod, which will denote our prod environment within the same cluster. Here you see prod cluster and dev cluster, but using namespaces, we will differentiate between a dev and a prod cluster. So what will happen is, if you are making any changes in the app config in the dev branch, that should automatically be pulled by GitOps operator and deployed to your dev branch. Anything you are pushing to your main branch should be picked up by GitOps and should be deployed in the prod namespace of that application. That's the setup that we want to achieve eventually. Right now, you can use any Nginx kind of image to deploy, but in parallel, if you get stuck with this or anything, you have to drive this in parallel. You have to take, so there are two things. You have to take the pet clinic application, put it into, fork that repo and have it in your account so you can make changes. Use configure Jenkins pipeline and try to push a repository. Try to push a Docker image into a repository. You got some idea what we want to do? And
Sanjeev, quick question.
Yep.
So when you install Argo, like as a service, will it be running in all nodes in a cluster, or it will be running only one or few nodes? Let's say if you have 3 nodes, 3 worker nodes. So when you install Argo, will it be running on all 3 nodes?
It will be running on us. It's not necessary. It's you define how it will be running, but it will have the permissions to deploy pods in all the instances or whatever worker nodes you have. It's driven by not by the presence on a specific worker node. It's more by the permissions. So even if it is hosted on a single node, it can deploy to other worker nodes as well.
So it won't be running on the master node. So it will only be running on the nodes, the worker nodes, not on the.
It will be running on the worker nodes. It's not going to be on the master at all. No. But because it's a service, it's not necessary that it has to have its presence on all the worker nodes.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Hello, Sanjeev.
Hi.
Will you make some clarity more about like what I am getting, that we have to install ArgoCD inside our cluster, and the ArgoCD makes synchronization with GitOps repo, right?
Yep.
So will you elaborate more about we are going to install ArgoCD inside our cluster As a service, I am not getting this.
So you have to follow this document for now. Follow this document, these commands, and also follow this specific page. As I mentioned, the advantage of ArgoCD is mainly because it is inside the cluster. Right? Just the getting started guide. So yeah, try to follow this and try to visualize that it is getting installed inside your cluster as a service. It's going to be exposed on a specific port for user interface point of view, but at the same time, it can connect with a specific GitOps repository that you provide, and based on that, it will pull these specifications and try to deploy, because it has, once you have deployed this, right, this has given it enough permissions to perform actions on your behalf in the cluster. So if your specification says the number of pods have to be increased from 2 to 5 or anything of that sort, then this can actually go and make that happen for you.
As a Kubernetes service or as a normal?
It all depends what you define in your manifest file in the GitOps repository. In your GitOps, it could be, there will be user interface of your application, there will be database, there will be storage, the rest of the things that you define are actually going to be in your app config related repository. Or this, that's why there are two repositories here. There is app, and then there is GitOps or your app config repository, basically. So this also isolates your app and also your configurations of that.
Sir, please correct me. So that means we are not going to commit code on Git, and Jenkins will not pull that repo and will not push the Docker registry. We are not going to do that. We are just, instead of that, we are going to DevOps engineer push the code on GitOps, and ArgoCD will sync that and install the cluster, right?
That is correct. If our image is not changing, if you identify that the application has to be updated, or there are issues in the Docker image, then the top layer will also execute. You found some issues that this Docker image has issues and it is not starting because of some issue, not able to connect to database because of the code issues. If that is the scenario, then yes, then Jenkins will come into picture, do all this sort of activity, create a new image, which will then be pulled. And DevOps engineer, otherwise, if he monitors that there is a spike or there is some such action that he has to take, he has to roll back to an older version. They are using a version like latest version in the production. There is an issue. He has to roll it back. He will come to GitOps repo and say, don't use the latest version. Use 1.0.1 specific version of the container image, which was stable. And then Argo will make sure that it will destroy all the latest images and create the same repository. So it differentiates or it isolates your application repository from your the application configuration repository, GitOps repository. So these are two different repos that it will work on. Jenkins will work on the building part of the image, but not on the deployment part of the stuff.
Sanjeev, one quick question. Let's say if I set up this locally using Vagrant, so I don't think I can set up webhook, right? Because it has to do because those are local to my system. So how can GitOps repo talk to my local system? It doesn't work, right?
GitOps, you need to ensure the connectivity so that the ArgoCD is able to reach your Git repository. That interface should be there. Now, whether it is locally set up or your GitOps repo is, because this ArgoCD is also going to talk to your container registry, which is probably, if you use Docker Hub, then Docker Hub, it has to connect and pull that image. So you will have to ensure that connectivity is there.
Yeah, but going out is fine, but coming in is a problem, right?
Yeah.
Like when you set up the webhook to
correct. that has to be ensured. Otherwise, again, there will be issues. And I'm sure that's possible, right? In the Vagrant environment, you can configure incoming as well, whether you use a proxy from your machine or.
Yeah, I don't know. That's going to be a bit challenging, I think, because it's completely local. So going out is fine, but from internet to local is.
It's
have to do
possible
something.
because we all the time we do in the Vagrant environment, Docker pull and all that. So it's doable. You need, and I believe it may be just out of the box as well. You just maybe some settings or something that it can use your proxy from your machine and using your own internet, and then everything should be exposed.
Yeah, I think I have to change the router settings and all that. Okay.
Yeah. But for me, when I'm using WSL, and everything is available to download and install. All right. So yeah, take these diagrams as reference. We are not having dev cluster, UAT cluster, and release cluster as in this diagram at the moment. We will use namespaces to differentiate between prod and dev cluster within the same cluster. That is the objective. Eventually, our application will look something like this. So first week, once we have set up that ArgoCD is able to push, pull from our repo, we will then start building our containers, start building the specific pet clinic specific stuff. So this week, focus on setting up the ArgoCD webhooks and that it can pull, and give it a maybe Nginx kind of thing, very basic stuff that it can easily pull from Git repository, from Docker repository, and then work on deploy that one, expose it on some port. So that's basic, very basic service you try to do. In parallel, try to build the pet clinic app so you can build a Docker image. That also you take up as a parallel step. So these two things. Next week, we will get more into how these things have to be deployed. A secret has to be created. The horizontal pod scaler has to be configured, storage class, the database, deployment, all these fancy stuff of the Kubernetes is what we get into. And we'll see, can we put UI and DB in the same pod? Pod is collection of collection of different Docker images and containers. We'll see if we can create a different kind of architecture also, having front end and back end into single pod. And we'll see what are the advantages and disadvantages of that. But that's for the second week of the this phase of the project. So our target is to reach to this level at the end of the week 3, not week 2. So we just so that you don't rush for everything and just take shortcuts to deploy. I have also given some steps, very high level, what you can do: containerization of the app, pushing it to Docker repository. But again, these are high level steps. I have also defined what minimum requirements you should follow for this project. And this is for the next week. I wanted to put some additional notes. So if somebody is really okay. If somebody is very junior and not very expert and want to do some basic stuff for now, they can probably use, okay, this is the note. If somebody is very starting new and not very well versed with Docker itself, they can use the public Docker Hub repository. If somebody is expert, I would suggest go with additional step, try to configure ECR or Azure registry in your environment. Again, going to be a bit of cost, but you will again learn extra because of that. So try to use your own registry. So your Jenkins pipeline will push to your own self-managed container registry. Make sure your dev branch is configured to use deploy in the dev namespace. Make sure your main branch is configured for the production namespace in your environment. Try to push Nginx kind of image this week. If somebody is really expert and they achieve this activity very quickly, or they are from July batch and the Docker image is ready, they can actually proceed to understand what services are going to be deployed and can they create some manifest for the front-end application or the replica set or something like that. So they can proceed to the next stage also if they want to, but not really necessary. Try to focus on the basics, try to use advanced stuff like setting up your own registry, etc. this week. So by the end of next week, we should have a stable Docker image for the Pet Clinic app. You will have to write a Docker file, create a Jenkins pipeline, push it to Docker repository of your choice, and you will also be ready with the GitOps setup. And if you face any issues, we will be working together in the group. That's where you guys can screen share each other, help each other, and you can try to build this as a project, because that's how in the industry we are given certain requirements, we are explained what needs to be done. You try to do it yourself, troubleshoot for 1 or 2 days. If you struggle, take help from each other. If you're still struggling, we'll involve additional senior people, and then that's how the issues get resolved. So take it like a project for yourself, and then try to do it in that fashion. So is it clear what we need to do for next week? What is the target and how we do it? At least an idea that this is how we have to progress. And if you go through the recording again, if you read the PDF again 1 or 2 times, you will get additional information.
Sanjeev, one quick question.
Yep.
Can Terraform be used to install ArgoCD?
Yes, it can be. Terraform can be used, but you will end up, because for AWS and Azure, a lot of documentation is there, a lot of information is there. You can actually get the Terraform code for that, creating the cluster and worker node much easier. But the beauty of Terraform is that you can also use it for managing your Kubernetes cluster as well. But it may take time. I would suggest you don't do that now, because it's not going to benefit your cost or anything of that sort. You will unnecessarily get into extra spending a lot of time there. But in future, when we finish this project, we will tell you like what extra you can do for this. Some of the best practices someone asked, some of the additional security things that we can bring in. So we will leave you with those few next steps, and you can do it as part of that.
Okay, got it.
I think that's pretty much I wanted to share. So don't worry about the complexity of this. Try to break it down into smaller tasks. That's my objective, that I am giving you specific tasks for this week. So you are not diverting into different directions, giving you a specific repository to follow so that everybody is following that, and they can help each other. So that is the idea.
So Sanjeev, there's a comment from Gaurav, and he has pasted multiple times that he's facing issues in creating nodes.
Sorry, I didn't read the chat. I was trying to explain.
Yeah, so I think I would suggest Gaurav that you should discuss this in the WhatsApp group. Just paste in whatever error that you're getting so that others can help.
Yeah. Sure. I think, see, we won't be able to troubleshoot with 70 odd people in the chat in this session. But yeah, bring it in the WhatsApp groups, and we will focus. And a lot of people, like when we started, a lot of people have achieved it already. So, and try to be active there. If somebody is explaining, I think somebody, was it Amanjeet or Dinesh, someone actually set up a Zoom call and explained it to everyone how he has achieved. So that was quite good. Like, I think it was in the AWS group, and very nice.
Yeah, Sanjeev. So from the same group reference, I pasted a link just now on chat, and that is the repository which is basically being used in a Terraform code to create a cluster. Now, those who haven't created a cluster yet, can this be a good reference for them? Like, if you can just go through that, all the things which are mentioned there, will they make sense, so that, just a reference point? I'm not asking everyone to follow that, but yeah, as a reference that can be taken. And if they stuck somewhere, these are the things they have to do to create a cluster. If you can validate that, please.
Sure. I'll take a look after this, and we'll share the feedback.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
But again, that's not the main objective. If it is helping you to create a cluster and the version is working as per the latest EKS cluster, I would suggest you start using it and destroy your resources after that.
So Sanjeev, what I did quite manual. I did not follow this step for now. I've created one T2.medium worker node and that one, sorry, the master node, and there is a separate node, okay, the worker node. So the the free version of it, T2.micro maybe, yeah. So that I have created. I'm able, when I run that kubectl get get nodes detail, that node is coming in that.
Okay.
So that kind of cluster is ready now. Is it okay to just go ahead and learn further things instead of focusing on Terraform and setting up the infra for now? I mean,
Correct.
can that be done?
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting, because
Yeah,
we are not focusing so much on the Terraform in this project. It is an added advantage that some of the people are able to learn, because we are having like a full week of time. So if people have time, the objective is to save some cost, destroy it on timely basis, and that is the benefit, but not the main part of the project. So if it is working for you, just do a brief check that the instances are being created, worker node, and no additional resources are being requested. That should be good enough.
Okay.
And we can harden that later on, like that can be an extension of the project, because you can create multiple small projects from here. You can manage the entire cluster using Terraform itself. You can the entire GitOps approach is possible through Terraform. You can create AMIs for your worker nodes. That can be a possibility. A lot of other small projects can be derived from here.
Yeah, you're right, Sanjeev. Actually, I was using cluster for some other purpose previously last month. Unfortunately, I couldn't able to delete that on time. This is end up with I seen bill was a bit high. So whatever you suggested was the right approach, and some colleagues also sharing good things. Actually, I'm glad that I joined here.
Yeah. All right. This is helping.
Sanjeev, one point. We can request for waiver also. We are using this free tier for learning purpose. Like that, you can give a mail. Sometimes they will help. Most of the times for the free tier on the learning period, they used to help. We can request the support team.
Yeah, you can try that. I don't know how I can help in that, but free tier is available to everyone if you sign up a new account or something for 1 year. So you can make use of that. And GCP anyway is offering a lot of free credits and free stuff. Somebody posted GCP related stuff.
Sanjeev, can we try in the same setup in the GCP now? Can we do that?
Yes,
Since I have a plus. Okay.
absolutely. But be mindful that it's not just cluster. If you are not proficient in GCP, then all the storage and the load balancer and the machines that are going to be created, they are going to be in the GCP. So if you are not very comfortable, you have never done it, you may be struggling. So if you are an AWS guy, you know better what kind of cloud you want to use.
Yeah, that's one of my problem last month. Actually, I was working for some projects, so I just trying both the clusters.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I cleared everything from the GCP, but I missed it to this one, AWS. So it ended up with a huge cost.
Yeah, so just keep an eye, be alert, but don't be afraid of, like, if you can always try to request AWS later on as well to waive off, but don't stop your learnings. Start to do it. Try to do it in the cloud if possible. And if you keep an eye on this, it won't go massively high. It will be in the budget. So you will be alerted if it is $5-10 or before that, which is not that bad.
Sure, Sanjay. Thanks for that.
And you can set up a billing alarm as well.
Yep.
Hello, sir. I have seen your mock interviews also. If I want to give you the mock interview, so what is the process?
Mock interview, you should see some of our videos. We keep suggesting we offer it for free of cost. We don't charge, or we have to spend 1 hour on the entire process. There is you already have our WhatsApp number, so you can send your resume on WhatsApp, but it won't be right away. It will be based on once we finish the August batch or somewhere in between.
Yeah. Actually, I also want to do study more. If I'll select it, then we will schedule that. If you have the time, then in next month or.
Sure. Right now, focus is to ensure that this batch is successful. Once that is done, then we will start recording more mock interviews.
Hi Sanjeev, one question.
Yeah, hi.
Like for interviews, like I'm a fresher. Okay, so like for interviews, those like pod YAML files and deployment files, those I can remember, but like it becomes complex in ingress, egress, and service and persistent volume, and in the to remember all those parameters, all those. So in interview, will they ask all sorts of things? Also for Ansible, many modules I can't remember, many syntax, and Terraform also, like.
That is when you do it with your hands, you will start to remember at least the key information. You will not remember all parameters, but you will understand. For example, if I have to create auto scaling group, I really don't know what sort of parameters I will have to, but I know that because it's an auto scaling group for an EC2, there it would probably be asking me AMI related information. It would be asking me how many are my minimum, maximum desired, that sort of information. But what's going to be the parameter name, what's going to be its value is something we will decide when we start creating auto scaling group. Same thing. If you do it with your hands, you will know a secret will have a username password kind of combination. A service will have, it will be exposed on a specific port, and you will start to relate things. And if you saw my video last week's session, this is where things get complicated. You will have to understand all possible resources that can be deployed and some of the key information that will be used in that. And next week we can
see. But like if we were unable to answer that, but we understand the process, so what will
you are on the mercy of the person who is taking interview. If
like basics of pod deployments and replica sets, all those are I have remembered, but
it all depends. That's why I can't comment that how he will take. You can improve your case that you not only theoretically explain what pod is, what service is, but understand what parameters go into that. You build 2-3 such projects or 2-3 services by yourself, not taking help from ChatGPT or documentation, or then I think you will remember that it's not that complex as well. But if I mentioned specifically, that's why I mentioned that focus, if somebody has to do a certification, they should do a CKAD, because there in that exam, you actually create a lot of files during the exam itself. So you have to be very fast creating those files and not creating any errors. That's how you pass that exam. So there is no shortcut. You have to remember, you have to learn. On the job, you will have a lot of time, but in the interview, they will probably not ask you that, your syntax should be absolutely correct. You give a close reference to that, and that should be good enough.
Okay, Sanjay, thank you.
You do it with your hand. Don't take help from tools in this project.
Yes,
Sanjeev, I have one query. Sanjeev, as you told, like we need to install that ArgoCD on a Kubernetes cluster, right?
Yep.
So after connected to I have connected to kubectl to the particular cluster authenticated. So should I follow that particular commands which are showed in that PDF?
Yes.
So then, for accessing that port, how I should access that particular port of that ArgoCD?
So there is an option in that you can expose your ArgoCD service and you can access that. If you look at the PDF, that already has a command to expose the service.
We have to expose the ArgoCD dashboard via command line, right?
Yes, correct. Port forward, basically. So again, not needed. It's not necessary that, but it for you to visualize that the pod that you are going to deploy, for example, Nginx, is it successful or not? To visualize that, if your configuration that you provided through command line, is that successfully given to your configuration in the ArgoCD that has been received properly, you can look at the user interface. But don't try to deploy applications. Even you can do that for practice once. Instead of giving everything through command line, you create the UI and then connect your Git repository through user interface. You can do that, but eventually target is that that it will be a manifest file which you will push to your ArgoCD.
Okay, Sanjeev, one more query is here. That's different from our project perspective. It's my personal question. Like I have an interview regarding a junior DevOps engineer next week that was scheduled. And what are the fear I came across? Like I have good practice and made some projects also. But the main thing where I struggle is to because my practice is to apply those things via documentation mostly. And but I am fearing like I am not sort of remembering the commands. So are these things, as a interviewer point of view, are these things going to create hecticness in for me? Like I have to concord all those commands for having good impact on the interviewer, or
I don't think the interviews are usually to assess the knowledge on the commands as such, but the concepts. For example, even I wouldn't be sure on some of the commands that we have implemented, but the concept that we will be installing ArgoCD in your cluster, and understanding that after that we will ensure that a Git repository has to be connected with ArgoCD. After that, the ArgoCD is going to pull an image from cluster. So the process is more important. The concepts are important than knowing how it will be done. This is Kubernetes. A lot of the things, because this offers that platform independence, so things will match across each other. But for example, you have to deploy a package onto a machine, EC2 instance. It would depend whether it is a RHEL machine or Ubuntu. So you can't really say that this is the command. So that would depend upon which repository you have, which flavor of Linux that you are using. A lot of things are not command specific. Concepts are where they will get into commands when they see that your concepts are not clear and you are explaining something random, and they would want to see more details. Then maybe they can get into command level stuff. Even if they ask you to create a Docker file or an Ansible file or a manifest Kubernetes file, they wouldn't be looking at commands or syntaxes and that sort of level. They would look at the structure of the file.
Okay, the main thing is the tool or the technology about which I am giving the answer. I have to have conceptual clarity on that and basic command that were used to execute those tools.
Correct.
Hey, hi Sanjeev, Umakant here.
Yeah.
So, just an add on to previous ArgoCD question. So when you said like we need to install ArgoCD in the Kubernetes cluster, let's say we have like multiple Kubernetes cluster for different departments like dev cluster, QA cluster, and prod cluster. So do we need to install ArgoCD in all three clusters? Because at the end of the day, we'll have like 3 instances of ArgoCD, right? So is that how we do it in real time, or we just manage everything with one ArgoCD instance?
If your clusters are, there's a separate dev cluster, separate stage, QA, and prod cluster, then ArgoCD will be deployed in each of the cluster, and their configuration of ArgoCD will be a specific branch or like main or dev or something like that. So that's how it will be. But in this project, because we want to save cost and want to keep it slightly simple, we will use namespaces to differentiate.
Yeah, okay, Sanjay, thank you. Okay.
So your dev, prod, QA, everything is going to be the same cluster, and same ArgoCD will manage it. So it will not be duplicated. But what will differentiate them is the branch of that repository, what it's using. Okay, I think let's spend some time on this, read through the document, watch the recording, previous recording, this recording again, and come to a conclusion that, are we going in the right direction, or are we deviating from the main objective of the project, and then come back to that track and then focus on the key skill set in this area that we are trying to build, and stay aligned with this project. Same repository, everything same. So you can take help from the WhatsApp group, or if you go to different like Vagrant or something and you get into a trouble, it will be difficult for anyone to suggest in that space. So try to keep the same tools and technologies if possible, and spend some time. Right now, there may be a lot of questions. Look at the, I will probably circulate this new PDF. Some minor changes are there, specifically around what we should do for next week. So those things, a lot of people are asking what we need to do this week, what we need to do this week. Please give us in the written format. So I have written it in this PDF. I'll circulate this new PDF. That's the only change. Rest of the things are exactly the same stuff. All right, I think I'll close this call for now. It's been like close to 2 hours.
Hey Sanjeev, before closing the call, I have one more question if you would like to take.
Sure.
Yes, Sanjeev, it's this one is also a bit from our project, but this was constantly coming in my mind, like as a enthusiast of a particular technology like DevOps, if we talk about, we are starting or keep learning about and try to master in that particular technology day by putting all our efforts, right? But the things like this time the era of AI just came across, and the things like a fear of those things, like I have just read some documentation or some article, like there is a like Chat GPT type things for DevOps, like Cubia, if I'm not getting the exact name, but the thing like that. So I want to because I am at the stage like a beginner stage also. These things should not keep come in our mind. I have to more focus on learning the things right now, but at the same time, as a human, the mind, this type of question, fairness type of question also coming in mind. So I want to just take your view on how AI going to impact on DevOps industry in upcoming 5 to 10 years, just in a brief, if you want.
Yeah, sure. See, it could be personal opinion or what my limited knowledge is. I wouldn't say that, that there will not be any impact. AI, not just DevOps and cloud, AI is going to impact pretty much all the industry, entire tech industry itself. Ever since the launch of ChatGPT, it's hardly been a day that I have not used it. Stopped using Google to that extent, use it all the time. Obviously, there are issues. The technology is going to mature, but you still need the right skill set. You cannot, a fresher or somebody who doesn't understand the technology cannot write a good prompt for ChatGPT and get a good response. So you need to give the right input to it, which you will only get after an experience, after you have the right certification, you understand all the services. That's when you will write a nice prompt for which you will get part of the things available to you based on the ChatGPT or any AI model that you are using, and you will be using it. Yes, it's going to impact, especially it's going to impact a lot of entry-level jobs and that sort of thing. Experienced people will still be able to manage for quite a bit of time. And as they say, right, like in the industry, it's not that you learn something today and then that's all you won't have to do anything else. You will keep evolving. These sort of things will, as the AI matures, as an individual, we will probably have to keep learning. So that learning will continue. Like we had to, when I was working as a .NET developer in my career, cloud and DevOps was not a thing, right? For 10 to 12 years. We had to get mature in DevOps. We had to then do cloud-related certifications, multiple of them. So we have already seen the impact from new technologies and these kind of thing. AI is going to be probably similar. The only thing is that it's advancing at a much faster rate and going to impact everybody. But the only solution, we know the problem, but the only solution is that we will probably have to learn AI in future. And it will also give us a lot of benefits, like a lot of things that we used to do, reading through Google and Stack Overflow and that kind of thing. Now ChatGPT helps it very quickly. And specifically very standard things. Creating a cluster, for example, Terraform code, you tell it that you are using this version of Terraform and you want this version of EKS cluster, and you will have the source code available quickly. There will be few errors. If you are expert, already have experience, you can understand, debug, you will be able to stand up it very quickly. So it will have its advantage. It's not going to eat away all the jobs, but it will have impact. And the only way to manage is to keep learning in that direction. That's why in a lot of my videos, I have been suggesting if you are a student, because we don't have a choice right now. We can't drop DevOps and cloud skill set that we have and start doing AI from today and be an expert in that space. Our core skill set in our organizations is still DevOps and cloud. So we will continue it, but in parallel, we will keep enhancing our knowledge. But if somebody is really in college, they have few years in hand before they start looking for job, they can explore this more on AI, ML kind of projects, data engineer, data science, understand what's the difference and focus on that space more rather than building of applications, deploying of applications. These are the sort of activities may be impacted by AI.
Thank you, sir.
All right, guys.
What time are you planning to start next Saturday, Sanjeev?
Next, I have put the dates in the presentation.
Yeah, dates are there. I thought today's session would start at 5 o'clock, so I got a little late to join that.
We'll do 4 p.m. IST, all these sessions. You are like you are in the group, right? We mentioned
Yeah,
2-3 times.
yeah.
4 p.m.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Next one is on 12th, 19th, then 22nd, and then September. And then we can extend it. Like it's not that we have to finish in these 2 weeks or 3 weeks. If we have people struggling, they want to learn, and we can always extend this. We are not starting any, at least I am not starting any new batch or something until this is successful, this is delivered. So the entire focus on you guys. So you also try to, spend some time and make use of it. Once this is close to finish, we will see how we have to do. But yeah,
hello. Hey, hi Sanjeev.
Hi Ujjwal.
Yeah, Sanjeev. So I am having experience in observability domain, and I'm coming from application performance monitoring. So like few years, I am learning this DevOps things, and I am AWS certified also. But I never worked as a DevOps engineer, or I have never worked in the real-time environment. So I'm just doing monitoring of Kubernetes and application from the browser side, mobile side. So there is a confusion with me. Shall I continue as an observability engineer because this domain is growing? Even DevOps engineer are also not very much focused about observability. So shall I continue in my observability engineer, and like DevOps will be as a plan B for me so that I can go as a DevOps or SRE anytime. So what's your recommendation?
Try to build some skill set, just monitoring something and, in just alone in a very narrow space, because a lot of these people, like you have 100 people from this group will also learn observability and monitoring in the next few days. So you are again competing, like a lot of people can build that skill. If they also bring a lot of cloud knowledge, a lot of DevOps knowledge, so you may be left behind very shortly. So try to, anything related in the industry, what's being deployed, what best practices they can follow, so that they have better results in the monitoring side. If you can look at things in your space itself. A lot of the time we are monitoring the application performance and APM or cluster stability. Look at the logs monitoring side of it if you have not done so. A lot of other things within your space, and also related things in the DevOps and cloud space are advised to learn. Otherwise, very narrow space is not advised that you be specialized in one area.
Okay, thank you.
So, and these all are related. You can be a better consultant and advisor regarding monitoring itself once you know how things are built and deployed and where those suggestions can go. For example, one of our monitoring person who is a log monitoring specialist, he gives us input that you try to put this information in your log files so that you can create a dashboard from this in future. So it's all related. That entire knowledge of the application and logs and monitoring is you get advantage if you know all other things, how things are in the rest of the pipeline.
Okay, thank you.
Guys, we'll take more questions some other time. If we'll close this for now. It's been close to 2 hours, and we do live sessions. Like I think we did 2 live sessions over the last week as well, where we don't talk about project that much. We talk about general queries and career discussions. So do check them out. Like 2 videos, myself and Saurabh, we did live for 1.5 hours online. So most of the people who are not in the project can also get benefit. I'm stopping the recording.